All right, today we're going to be talking about why more young men are moving back in home with their parents than ever before, what's causing this, some statistics, and then we're going to talk about some solutions because this is something a lot of young men are struggling with right now. They don't have the income, they do not have the opportunity, and everything has skyrocketed in price, or so it seems. So, first of all, some key statistics. Roughly 19% of 25 to 34-year-olds are living with their parents. That's a 2023 statistic. And the interesting thing about this is when you look at it by gender, who's living at home as a male versus as a female, men are about 30 or 40% more likely to be stuck living at home than women, okay? So this shows that, by and large, younger men are struggling to be able to afford housing, whether it's renting or owning, especially owning houses in this crazy market. And then women are not doing as bad as men, and they're actually doing better. Okay, so another interesting statistic is if you break it down by even younger, kind of 18 to 30-year-olds, 42% of Americans 18 to 30 are living with their parents, okay? So this is something that obviously COVID spiked this, but this is an increasing trend where a lot of housing and just earning a living and the cost of living has gotten much more difficult. And you'll see a little bit later on how wages really have not kept up with inflation. Okay, so we're not making as much money and everything has inflated in price and it's harder and harder to get by on the same paycheck. Okay, so there's something called boomerang kids where essentially they leave the home and then they come back home, whether it's because they screwed up, they failed, they lost their job, some catastrophic injury, something like that. 18 to 35-year-olds, roughly half or 46% have been boomerang kids, right? So maybe they moved out, got a job right after college or early 20s, things were good, and then something happened, they stalled out, they screwed up, and they had to boomerang back home, okay? Almost 50% in this age group are boomerang kids. And as of 2024, less than 25% of 25 to 34-year-olds achieve the four pillars of traditional success, which would be full-time employed, earning a decent income, independent, so either owning or renting their own home, married and with children, okay? Less than a quarter of 25 to 34-year-olds have achieved all four of these things. This is actually down almost 50% since 1975. So in 1975, by roughly 30-ish, way more people had a good job, were independent, had their own housing, were married and had kids, right? And a lot of these things are kind of, you need one to get all the others, which is mainly you need to have a good job in order to even be able to afford housing, in order to even consider dating, in order to even have children, right? So with that, we're seeing essentially a collapse since the mid-70s. And looking back statistically, right around 1979, 1980 is when a lot of things went from growing to then stagnation to now decline in terms of median income for men adjusted for inflation really has not increased at all. It's actually slightly decreased since the late 70s, early 80s. Obviously, housing has only gone up in price, cost of living, all these other things, okay? So with some of these statistics around, young men specifically are not doing as well and seem to be moving back in or not even being able to move out in the first place. looking at some of the historical context, let's take a look at that to see traditionally what had happened for previous generations, right? So post World War II, most people in their early 20s were independent, right? They had their own job, they moved out, they got married in their very early 20s, usually around 22, 23, and were able to have children, okay? That's post World War II. In the 70s to 90s, this is when, and it always has been for the most part, but independence was seen as a rite of passage, right? If you've noticed, the less you see people, the more respect they have for you because your time seems more scarce. It's the same kind of phenomena with your parents, right? When you have your own domicile, your own house, right? Your own apartment, and then you see your parents, whereas before you were always like bickering and all these things, maybe. But when you have independence, they're like, oh, I don't see them that often. We don't live together anymore. All of a sudden, they start to treat you with more respect. So that kind of rite of passage is huge for especially men, because our traditional role is to be the protector and provider. And if we cannot achieve our own place of living that we pay for and that we have, then we feel less respected, right? So today, this has basically resulted in a kind of delayed adulthood. Could call it failure to launch, or just overall delayed, really, where independence, marriage, kids, stable career, this is something that takes way longer, often now 30s, mid-30s, to be able to have all these things, to actually finally establish yourself as an adult, right? And not just a man-child, okay? So, number 3, let's talk about some economic pressures, right? Let's talk about why all of these things are happening. So, median male income has been flat since 1980, okay? In 1980, adjusted for inflation, it's about $61,000 for men. That was the median income, and it has actually decreased by about 1% since then. So, although men on paper it looks like we're earning more, adjusted for inflation, we're not even pacing to keep up with the cost of living, right? And women actually still earn less than men on average, roughly 51 to 54K versus our 60-some thousand. But they're catching up, okay? They're increasing because they're getting their college education more, potentially because of some feminism in society, right? Favoring women on job applications, they're twice as likely to get hired than a man, and a bunch of other factors. Men just not deciding to go to college because of how expensive a diploma is now, and logically we think, well, if I have to spend 4 years in school just to pay it back for 30 years, is that worth it, right? So median income flat for men, not good. Housing affordability is in a full-blown crisis right now, okay? So since COVID especially, a lot of housing has gone up over 50%. The price to buy a house is now 2 times more expensive to buy rather than rent. So people are stuck renting, so people don't have the money, so they can't buy. So all of these things just show that men aren't able to secure their own homes purchased, right? So with student loan and tuition debt, this one is also a stress factor, where roughly the average student loan debt coming out of college is almost $40,000. And so, you come out with a 4-year degree, and a lot of people study absolute garbage that is not going to help them get doesn't have real skills and is not in demand, but you're still stuck with this unforgivable loan, right? And so this just weighs you down on every single month. You have to pay this back. And so because of that, it's harder to get a job, and then also the job market has become less stable. So with outsourcing, with globalization, with AI now even, you have to compete with robots, and a few other factors. You come out of college with debt, and then you struggle to even get a job, okay? So within that, kind of a subcategory of that would be declining blue-collar work, okay? So in the mid-50s, 60s, 70s, the U.S. had a lot of manufacturing jobs, cars, auto parts, right, and other things like that. And now we've seen this almost collapse about 40 or 50% over the years, with robots taking these jobs, and overseas manufacturing is cheaper. Okay, so with all of this, you can't just get a job at your local factory and then work there for 20, 30 years like you used to be able to. It's now much more difficult, okay? So another aspect of this would be the rising gig economy. So driving for Uber Eats, Grubhub, any of these other kind of like side hustles that you do after your full-time job because you don't make enough money. This just stresses people out even more. It doesn't pay very well, but it's unfortunately what a lot of people have to resort to just to pay the bills, okay? And so with all of this, we see less stable occupations. You don't see pensions anymore to where you could work for the same corporate office or same factory and then work there for 20, 30, 40 years and then retire and have a pension. That's basically a thing of the past now. Now it's, you have to learn all these skills, and technology keeps on advancing, and so we have to keep updating our skills, and then we job hop every couple of years, either due to layoffs or because, we're not making enough money and we're not getting raises and things like that. So it's less black and white and more gray area in terms of like, what do I do for work? If I can't work at the same place and don't know, my long-term trajectory, what's going to happen, okay? So on top of that, touched on a little bit, but going deeper on inflation and cost of living, right? Groceries, utilities, healthcare, all of this has skyrocketed. And especially insurance just continues to go up over time, right? You're not necessarily making more money, but they're charging you more, okay? And by law, you have to have auto insurance. You really need health insurance, otherwise you're absolutely fucked if you get in a car accident, right? And then you need to keep the lights on, so you need to keep paying your energy bill. And then you go to the grocery store and you see firsthand, hey, this bag of rice that used to cost $5 now costs $10. Thought the government was saying inflation is only 3% a year. That's 100%, right, in the last 5 years. What's going on? So with the cost of living and inflation and economic pressures, young men and most people should be calculating this and basically saying, why move out and struggle if I can stay at home and be supported and have lower bills and all of these things. So if you're lucky enough to have a family that supports you, then a lot of people opt for that immediately, maybe at the cost of mental health and independence and dating life. But hey, at least I don't need to take out massive credit card every debt just to, pay my bills. Okay, so some of the cultural and societal implications of this are largely the same, but they've kind of changed a bit over the years, especially since COVID. So since the pandemic, there's a little less stigma with living at home, and men are primarily the ones that feel that kind of shame about, I live at my parents and I'm 25, 26, 27, whatever. But this has become a more understanding kind of aspect with, shit's fucked, cost of living, right? So people kind of understand, but you still don't feel good about it, right? So in Western societies, we are pushed to succeed and be independent as soon as possible, right? But a lot of other cultures aren't that way. There's multi-generational households where the kids, parents and grandparents all live together, and you don't even consider moving out until you have enough to buy a house and start a family and all these things. But a lot of Western people, Americans, people in the UK, Canada, and things like that, we want to just move out and have independence ASAP. We don't care if we can barely make it, right? And so with that, we see essentially delayed life milestones. People, especially men, now get married later. It's now roughly 30 to 31 years old for the average man to be married. In the post World War II, it was roughly 22 or 23 years old. So, men are delaying marriage. They're struggling to establish themselves, right? Housing and costs of all those things just to survive have gone up drastically, and male median income has not kept up with inflation. Okay, so with that, careers and parenthood is pushed back, right? Delayed, because a lot of people, especially if you rationalize it, it's like, yeah, I'm not even going to consider starting a family until I have my ducks in order, or ducks in a row, or whatever that saying is, right? Not until I have my housing, my job, savings, all those things. So, but with this, there is maybe a little more forgiveness and understanding of parents willing to support their kids for longer when they see, yeah, the median cost of a house was 3 times our median earnings back in 1970. It's now 8 times your median earnings. That doesn't sound good. So you need to work a lot longer to pay for the same house. And so with that, we see some psychological implications. What happens when people are delayed and are still living at home and expected all these things but aren't getting them, right? So the pros of living at home is reduced financial stress, and you have more time, right? You have less pressure to have to pay the bills, so maybe you can experiment and start a business, pursue hobbies, consider other things, travel, right? So maybe a little more flexibility on, even if I lose my job or can't find one, I still have a roof over my head with my parents, right? But the cons are you feel a sense of failure, shame, like you're delaying life, and like, man, I thought I would have already been balling out of control and living in a mansion and all these things, but I'm still stuck at home, I don't feel so good about this, right? And then probably also a bigger one for a lot of people is family tension. So when they're living at home, early 20s normal, mid 20s okay, late 20s, 30s start to panic, right? So tension can arise from that. And so what can you do about this, right? With economic pressures, inflation, cultural and society, psychological kind of implications that go along with this, what's the solution? Well, on a policy level, the government could do a little better job on housing and say, hey, maybe BlackRock and all these other investment firms should not be able to buy up all these single-family homes and then rent them out, right? Maybe homes should be for living in and not for investing. That's a huge argument that I hear, and it could be valid, right? We also have wages to consider. Why aren't wages going up? Why aren't they keeping up with inflation? Why are corporate profits skyrocketing? Why is the stock market making all-time highs, but your average middle-income American is doing arguably worse than ever before? Okay, and then education. Why does it cost $100,000 or more for a 4-year degree with a liberal arts English bachelor's degree that doesn't really translate into any tangible, in-demand, high-paying skills? What is going on with that? On a personal level, okay, you always have self-development. Okay, I talk about this a lot on the channel. You have health, fitness and relationships and your income, right? So you should prioritize your health, so you feel good, right? So that you can gain skills and make more money, and then also maintain healthy relationships so you don't go crazy just being a robot working all day. Okay, and then reframing this, instead of feeling like you're shamed or feel bad, you can see this as a strategic opportunity. Hey, I can save more money. I have a little more room to breathe. I can think about a longer term plan, right? Rather than having to run on the hamster wheel and pay rent and pay all these bills just to survive, right? And so if you're living at home, my question to you is, are you using it as a springboard, or are you just using it to get by and float around? Click the video appearing on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in that next video.